I'm just coming back from seeing Black Widow, and wow, that was the first time I'd seen a movie in a theater since January 2020 when I went to see Bad Boys for Life. So it was a welcome return. I hadn't been in that theater for so long, I forgot how to get around. I had to ask the ticket taker how to get to my my screening room. But man, it was interesting. No more ticket sellers. That's been all replaced by kiosks. So the movie-going experience, it was interesting. I think it's all about to change again because I think this Delta variant is going to shut it down once more. But it was cool to see a movie in theaters again. Now, let's get right to it. Black Widow. Since this movie was announced, I was of the mind that this movie is like past its time. And because I've seen Black Widow on screen in the MCU a number of times now, that to me, her individual solo movie is almost moot at this point. I don't really even care. There's been enough backstory enough for me to be like, okay, this is not a story that even needs to be told. The other weird thing about this movie is that I believe that this film falls somewhere within the timeline between Civil War and Endgame, or maybe Infinity War. Be that as it may, after the fact that we know that Natasha dies in Endgame, which that should not be a spoiler, it kind of, makes everything in this film a little moot, if you will. Although I will say, the film did manage to take me away from that. I didn't find myself thinking none of this matters because Natasha's dead. But if you look at the events in Endgame and Infinity War, where half of the universe was wiped out by Thanos, I really think Marvel kind of wrote themselves into a corner with that in terms of suspense with any upcoming MCU film, because how bigger can the stakes get than what we saw in Endgame? So the plot of this film, Black Widow, it does kind of seem like the stakes don't really matter, because we just saw half of the universe blotted out in Infinity War. And the other weird thing is that, and I don't want to spoil this, well, this is a mild spoiler. There's an end credit scene that kind of addresses or speaks to the fact that Natasha is dead. And it does set up what could be a really interesting plot in a future MCU film featuring Natasha's younger sister, who's played by Florence Pugh, an excellent actress. I know her from Stephen Merchant's Fighting in the Family film, which came out maybe 2 years ago. But they do set up an interesting subplot that I'm looking forward to seeing. But again, that end credit scene that pays tribute to Natasha's death just brings home the fact that, you know what, the events of this movie, they just don't hold a candle to what we saw in Infinity War and Endgame. I'm going to put that aside because I think that's a problem going forward with any Marvel Cinematic Universe film that's going to come out in the near future. This film introduces an element of villainy that just seems a little like tacked on. Like, it's one of those things where something is introduced in a franchise that you're thinking, well, how come we never saw the results of that? Or it seems like a washing over, or just like a last minute thing that they inserted into a 21 film franchise that I'm thinking, you're kind of throwing that in at the last minute. It involves, I'll say, a quote-unquote family of Black Widows, which becomes an element, and I'm trying not to spoil, it becomes an element of an evil plot that I can help but think, well, again, it feels tacked on. And the plot in this film, and basically the film itself, the story itself, it just seems like a mishmash of other movies we've seen or other concepts we've seen, even within the MCU itself. There is a large portion of the plot that's dedicated to mind control. And it just seems like, well, haven't we done that to death with Bucky? It's also been done to death in the Jason Bourne franchise, in that a major plot point is that Natasha has vowed revenge against the people or the organization that kidnapped her and brainwashed her in the Red Room. So there's nothing in this movie that you have not seen before. Again, it feels cobbled together from so many different films. There's even a sequence where someone is crawling through air ducts, and I'm thinking, oh, that's Die Hard. I mean, it's that type of a movie, right? But here's what the film has going for it. First of all, I would hazard to guess, or I would say, that this is one of the best films, if not the best film, action film, that has a female lead. And I'm thinking of, I was hoping to see that in Atomic Blonde. I was hoping to see that in the, I forget the name of the film, but it starred Taraji P. Henson as a gunman or a gun person. I kind of saw it in the Wonder Woman films, although those films, while not horrible, were very problematic for me. So it's got that going for it. It does have a female lead. It's someone that we're invested in already from having seen her in so many films, which was also a detriment. But the fact that this film has some really top-notch action sequences. The first action sequence was cut kind of like in a way that I hate when they cut, where they kind of hide. It's hard to tell what's going on. But for the most part, the action sequences in this film are top-notch. This film has a major theme about family. Whether we're talking about the family of girls who were kidnapped for the Red Room program, or the introduction of Natasha's family with the Red Guardian and her sister, who is, I believe, is also a Black Widow, and the mother. Now, there's a huge twist in that, which I'm not going to give away, but I think it was already seen in the trailer that the father was the Red Guardian. The father was an interesting character. That was a little weird to me, too. In the beginning of the film, there's a flashback to Ohio, 1995, and the father comes off as a badass who's almost like ready to go, like John Wick. He's got his gun stored up, and he's like, he's a badass. But then when we meet him 21 or so years later, he's basically comic relief, which was a weird tonal shift for me. I don't know when this film was shot. I don't know if it was, I'm assuming it was shot after Endgame, but I guess they took a look at how Thor was treated in that film, you know, because, you know, Thor had on a fat suit. He was supposed to be, the character got overweight, which added a lot of comedy to that character, which I did not like. But I'm assuming that they saw that and like, hey, let's add that in here, because there are tons of fat jokes in regards to the Red Guardian. And again, to me, it just kind of diminished the character that we saw in the first act of this movie, in the flashback, who was like a super spy kind of guy, to a guy who is now, when we see him in the present day, just there to provide laughs for the most part. But overall, the film does a wonderful job of establishing a strong family theme with the Red Guardian, Black Widow, her little sister, the mother, and frankly, all of the other Black Widows that are part of the main story. Since we're talking about family here, I need someone to explain to me once and for all, is Natasha Russian or not? Because, you know, we meet her family here in this film. I'm not going to spoil the plot twist, but the father, the mother, and the younger daughter they all speak with a Russian accent. Natasha doesn't. Why? And I do recall when we first met Black Widow in, I think it was Iron Man 2, I believe she did speak with a Russian accent. So, did I miss something? Did they explain that and I missed it? But it's just a little, I want to know what's going on here. In regards to the other girls, the other Black Widows, it would have been nice to have seen some, you know, not gratuitous, but seeing some scenes that kind of show what the torture they went through. There's a small scene that contains dialogue that indicates that they undergo genital mutilation, which was powerful, even though it was played as a joke. I don't know if that made it even more powerful, but it did. And there's a scene, a quick scene where we see a lot of the girls marching or going through a choreography with their guns in unison, and they're all in lockstep. And that one scene did a great job of showing, of kind of communicating that these girls must have went through a hell of a trauma to be able to perform like that. So while it does give me that, it would have been nice to have seen a little bit more of what the Black Widow program does to the girls that are involved with it, the girls that are kidnapped and made a part of that program. I want to put that aside to move on with what I really liked about this movie, and that brings me to the next thing. One of the villains in this film is the Taskmaster. And man, that character was badass. I think that character, now let me just say this, I'm not going to spoil this, but the Taskmaster is not really the main villain in this film. The Taskmaster is basically a henchman in this movie. And he is by far one of the best Marvel villains in the MCU, even though, yet again, he does not have a lot of screen time, but when he's on screen, he comes off as invincible. He almost comes off as a Terminator. I loved that character. I want to see more of that character, and I believe when we leave the movie leaves it open that we could see more of the Taskmaster. Now, there is a tremendous twist involving that character, which I will not spoil. I will say it's not the Taskmaster that I recall reading in the Avengers comic books. Now, people know me that I'm a purist, okay? I want things just like they were in the books. I do give way to that every now and then. I do concede that. I was willing to let it go for this movie because what they did with that character, the twist, was a perfect payoff and a perfect callback to another flashback scene where we see a young Natasha. Did they have to include that twist in the film and change up the character like that? Not really. Was it necessary to change up the character and involve that plot twist and make the character drastically different from the books? No, it wasn't necessary. Was it kind of corny? A little. But I'll admit it worked. It wasn't horrible. I see why they did it, and it kind of worked. The film moves at a brisk pace. It's pretty tight. I mean, it can't help but be tight because the story is, like I said, rather trite. It's nothing you haven't seen before. There's a template that's been put in place by tons of other movies. So they use that, the producers use that to their advantage. So the movie moves at a brisk pace. There was one portion of the film, it's right in the middle, where I did find myself looking at my watch. It's a scene where we get a lot of exposition about the family, about Natasha's family. I think that middle portion of the film could have taken half the amount of time to accomplish what it does. There are, I have to say, a number of scenes in this film where you wonder, is Natasha superhuman? A lot of scenes where she gets in car accidents, she falls from great heights, she's able to lift things that you think she would not be able to lift. Just a number of times where I said, oh, well, she'd be dead. That would have killed her. Oh, they just kind of brush it off and walk along to the next scene. But I'll say this, the movie, while not great, it was better than I thought it would be. And because of that, because of the family aspect of it, because of some pretty good action scenes, and by the way, this movie was directed by a woman. I cannot remember her name, but I would love to see what else she does in the future. But because of all those positive things, because of the Taskmaster alone might make me want to watch this film again. Combine all of that, and it makes me feel generous. I'm going to give this movie 3 reels. And that's the martini.